Hi everybody, it's Geordie from Geordie's Cards and thank you so much for joining me today. I am participating in the Team Tiny October 2022 hop. The theme this time is Halloween, of course, and I'll be talking a little bit more about the hop as we go through, but I want to start by showing you the products that I'm using today. So I have this Hello Bluebird Halloween Party stamp set. I also have the coordinating dies. I'm using this Hello Bluebird Rainbow Square die. And finally, the Lawn Fawn Nighttime Sky Stencil. I cannot get enough of this stencil at the moment. I absolutely love it. So now I have this piece of a Bristol smooth cardstock. It is a square. I'm not 100% sure of the measurements, but it is larger than the die I'm going to be using. Now I've used some repositionable tape on that moon stencil. So this is the actual round part of the stencil. And I'm just kind of bringing that die in because I'm going to be using that. Now this die is obviously a rainbow square, but it cuts a really nice frame. So all I'm going to be using from that die is the frame. And I just wanted to try and make sure that I had this fairly well centered up and that it was going to fit in nicely. Probably an easier way of doing that, but that was the way I went with it. So now I'm bringing in some Distress Oxide inks and I'm just going to add a splodge of this Twisted Citron in 4 places around my moon. Now, obviously, this is an odd color to use for a nighttime sky, but I'm going over it with this chipped sapphire. And I think what it creates is just a bit of a spooky glow, and I kind of like the effect that it gives. So I know it's an odd choice, but I just kind of liked it, and I just think it gives that kind of, as I say, a bit of a spooky glow to the sky. Now my mask did move a little bit despite having the repositionable tape there. So what I ended up doing is bringing in one of my magnets from my Make Art station and plonking it down on top, and that seemed to work a treat. So I'm going to go over and I'm going to add this chipped sapphire all over, going over that Twisted Citron and all over the card, and then not too worried about the bottom part because that is going to be covered up later on. And then what I'm going to do is bring in that black soot and just go all around the edges with the black soot. So while I'm doing this ink blending, let me tell you a little bit about Team Tiny and our hop today. So Team Tiny is a group of paper crafters with YouTube channels. All of us are small channels. We have less than 1,000 subscribers. And the idea of the hop is to try and reach a wider audience and perhaps reach some people who have not heard of us before and maybe want to think about subscribing to our channels. Obviously, we love to have new subscribers. That's always great. I personally do this YouTube thing because I really enjoy my crafting and I enjoy sharing what I do. But of course, it's always nice to get a bit of validation as well. So I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel if you like my content. And obviously give us a thumbs up. That's always helpful as well. And leave a comment because I would love to hear from you. And I love to hear what you think of the project that I've made, or whether you're making similar projects, that kind of thing. It's always just nice to hear from you. And I do encourage you to hop along with us and see what everybody else has made. To do so, you can just click the link that I've left in the description box below, or you can type hashtag Team Tiny October 2022 hop into the search bar of YouTube, and you will come up with all the other videos on the hop. Okay, so just to tell you what I've done with this card now, I have sprinkled some water over top and picked it up with a paper towel. And now I just have some white watercolor paint and I'm splattering that all over, plenty of splatters here to create a nice nighttime sky. Once that was dry, I did use my heat tool because I'm a bit impatient. I took the other part of the stencil, which kind of blocks out the background piece and just leaves the opening for the moon. And I'm going in there with some Lawn Fawn Butter ink. Now this is a really pale, soft yellow, and I just thought it worked really nicely for this moon. I'm kind of going slightly heavier handed in the center of the moon and blending out towards almost white around the edges, just a hint of color there. As I said, it's a very, very pale shade, but I think it works really nicely for a moon here in this spooky nighttime sky. So pick the stencil up again, and now I'm going to replace it back down, but I'm going to center those kind of crater pieces on top. Now, I was kind of figuring out which way I wanted my craters to go. did I want to use the big ones or the smaller ones? I decided to use the bigger ones. And before I go ahead and ink everything down, I'm going to add these post-it notes just to kind of block off any pieces that I didn't want to kind of be inked. So there are lots of openings in the stencil, so you have to be a little bit careful that you're not kind of going outside of those openings, if that makes sense. Now I've got some Lawn Fawn Narwhal ink, and I'm just kind of blending that through, dabbing it on with my blender tool. And again, not too heavy-handed, but making sure there's enough on there. And there we have it. There's my nighttime sky. I love this moon. I think it's awesome. So I've gone ahead and cut that frame out from some black cardstock. And now I'm just kind of figuring out where it's going to go. I also cut a piece of black cardstock with this grassy border die. I have gone ahead and colored and cut out my images. Now with this cat, the die doesn't cut that kind of centerpiece where the steam or the kind of liquid from the cauldron kind of rises up in the air. So I went ahead and fussy cut that out myself because I didn't want all that white space in the middle of my image. Now, again, there's probably a much easier way to do this, but I've just laid everything out where I want it, and I'm now kind of putting some pencil marks down on my grassy border and also on my background panel to kind of figure out where I need to trim these down so that they fit behind this lovely border that I've created with the die. So again, there is probably a much more accurate scientific way of doing this, but it worked fine, so that's all good. So I'm going to lay these pieces out again onto my stamping platform, and before I kind of glue anything down, I'm going to stamp out my sentiment. So I'm going to use some white heat embossing powder onto some Versamark ink. So I have chosen, there's a couple of little sentiments in this stamp set, and I've chosen this one which just says spooky. So it's a very small sentiment, but I thought it was kind of cute. So before I go ahead and stamp it down, I just remembered last minute that I needed to use my powder tool. I often forget this and always live to regret it. So I put plenty of powder down there, and then I've stamped it out with that Versamark ink. I'm going to lift everything up, and then I'm going to pull in my embossing powder, and I'm going to go ahead and white heat emboss this. So I've just got a little spoon in there, and I just tap it off I'm going to do this a few times because I wanted to make sure I got a really nice crisp image there, and just using a little paintbrush to kind of flick off any extra bits that got kind of stuck on there. Despite using my powder tool, there's always a little bit left over, isn't there? And now I'm going to bring in my heat tool. I generally try and heat the back a little bit first and then heat the front. I find that just stops it from kind of warping too much. And now I'm going to figure out how I'm going to attach it to the frame. So what I'm going to do is just take my glue, which is clogged up. So I have the little pin that I'm going to pull out, and I'm going to unclog my glue before we go any further. And I'm just going to add some glue kind of around the edges and the bottom of this grassy piece, and then just attach it to the frame so that I kind of get it in the right spot. Once I'm happy with that, I want to attach it to my background panel. So again, I'm going to add the glue to the background panel, just all the way around the edges, a little bit more at the bottom where that grassy piece is going to be. I do like to make sure I've got plenty of glue, so I go back over it a few times, and then I just line everything up and make sure that my frame is over that background panel and everything is stuck down and adhered nicely. I'm just making a flat card today. I'm not using any foam tape or any dimension. It's just going to be a nice, simple, flat card. Just going to add a little bit of extra glue there behind that grass, which was kind of sticking up a little bit. And once that's done, it's just a case of attaching my little images. I coloured these today with my Artify markers. I will leave the colours that I used in the description box below, but I did have a lot of fun colouring these in, especially that little cat with the little stripes on him. He's a bit like a tiger. And before I stick this pumpkin down, I decided I was going to add a little bit extra to it. So I've got my black Copic multi-liner out, and I'm going to create a little jack-o'-lantern face on him. Now, I am no artist by any stretch of the imagination, but I find these little jack-o'-lantern faces quite easy to add. I'm just adding little triangles for eyes and nose, and then a kind of toothy grin, which I'm going to fill in with the marker. Once that's done, I'm going to attach that down onto the right hand side there, just tucked into the grass, so it's kind of popped in there. So I'm kind of going with this rule of 3 here. I've got 3 little images, and I'm kind of creating a bit of a triangle with them because I think that kind of helps your eye, draws your eye to the center of the card and to the images without detracting from them, if that makes sense. Apparently this is a little bit of a theory that you can use to create a nice balanced image. Now my card is going to be a custom size. It's 4 3/4 square. So I trimmed a piece of cardstock to 9.5 by 4 3/4 and scored it at 4 3/4. And that way you're not going to see any of the card from behind that kind of frame. Now, before I did attach it down, I did just stamp out a little sentiment again from the same stamp set, which says "Be afraid," and there was a little raccoon reading a spooky storybook, which I thought was really, really cute. Now, it took me a minute to figure out which way to attach this card on so that it was the right way, but I got there in the end. And that is it. My card is done, and I really enjoyed this one. It was a lot of fun today. I hope you enjoyed it too. I do hope you will join us in the hop and go and check out the other channels. There's some lovely, amazing crafters in there, all with some wonderful ideas for Halloween, and it would be great if you hop along with us. So please do click that link below. Please subscribe to my channel. I'd love to see you come back again, and thank you so much for joining me today. Take care.